Mistake 1. Not paying attention during the prep phase. You'll see this all the time when you're playing ranked. You'll notice teammates just sitting around in the prep phase AFK, not doing anything. And this can be really devastating for your rounds. The reason for this is because if you waste too much time scrolling on your phone before actually playing during the prep phase, you're not going to have enough time to put down all your gadgets or reinforce all the walls that your team might need. So you might have a hole in your setup that the enemy team can abuse against you. Mistake 2. Not shooting drones in the prep phase. A lot of times in ranked, players will just be too focused reinforcing or placing their gadgets down to even care about drones driving by them to go into the bomb site. If you let drones drive by you during the prep phase, it allows the attackers to potentially get their drone into a good position to watch the bomb site or to watch rotations around the map, meaning that the decision not to shoot that drone might come back to bite you later in the match. Always shoot drones no matter what in the prep phase. You don't have to specifically hunt them out, but if you hear a drone drive by you, even if you're in the middle of placing a gadget down, you should shoot it. Mistake 3. Having an operator main. A lot of players, when they first start out in Siege, they'll choose one operator and just main them permanently, and that will be the only operator they play when they get to each side. This is a horrible idea. The reason why this is such a problem is because you're not learning how all the other operators in the game works. So when you go up against them, you're going to be completely lost. But the main reason why this is such a problem, especially in Siege X, is because the enemy team can choose to ban your main. And if you only play 1 or 2 operators on defense, this can be devastating. If the enemy team notices that you're doing really good on Jaeger, they can just ban Jaeger outright and you have no recourse. So make for sure to be playing more than just a few operators on defense. Mistake 4. Not hopping on cams at the end of the prep phase. You always want to have at least one guy on your team hop on cams at the end of the prep phase, because this can allow you to see where the attackers are spawning, which can give you information about where they're going to enter the map from and what kind of push they're going for. So try to get in the habit of doing this, because if you don't do it immediately at the end of the prep phase, it'll give the attackers time to shoot the default cams outside, and then you won't have any info. Mistake 5. Forgetting to bring wall denial. This happens a lot, especially in solo queue. If you're not paying attention to what your teammates bring, you might end up loading into the round and finding out that no one picked bandit or Cade. And this will end up losing you rounds a lot of the time, because if you don't have any sort of wall denial or hatch denial, the enemy team will be able to easily breach any reinforcements they want and be able to open up massive lines of sight into the bomb site. So while bandit and Cade may not be the most fun operators, you always want to have at least one person on your team playing them. Mistake 6. Spawn peeking. Many players will love to push back on this because they just enjoy spawn peeking and think it's fun. However, you're going to end up losing more rounds than winning based off of spawn peeking, because when you open a barricade, it's extremely loud, so the enemy team will be able to hear you doing it on their drones if they have any left on the map. And also, if the enemy team is smart and they have a drone somewhere in spawn, they can see the window that you're peeking and just pre-fire you before you can even react. 9 times out of 10, it's not worth spawn peeking, because you're just going to end up putting your team at a disadvantage when you die. Mistake 7. Barricading too many doorways. You'll see this a lot in lower ranks. Players will just start barricading every doorway because they're super scared and don't want to get caught off guard by the attackers. However, this ends up doing more harm than good. The reason why is because it stops your teammates from being able to rotate between the bomb sites, and it also stops them from being able to get back to the site. So if you have a roamer playing somewhere else on the map and they start rotating back to the site, if you've barricaded all the doorways, they're not going to be able to get back in, and the attackers, if they're planting or inside the site, they're going to be able to react to that roamer entering the site and get a free kill on them. Never barricade doorways into the site because of this. Mistake 8. Equipping laser sights to your weapons. A lot of players who are frustrated with the slower ADS speeds of modern Siege will bring laser sights on all their weapons. However, on defense, this is almost always a bad idea. The reason why on defense this is such a bad idea is because since you're a defender, you're going to be spending a lot more time just holding angles and not actually running or pushing the attackers. So there's very few situations where you need a faster ADS speed. And the downside of a laser sight is a lot more prevalent on defense, because if you're holding an angle on a doorway, if an attacker sees that laser sight, they're going to know that you're holding the angle and they're going to be able to pre-fire you. So it's almost never worth running a laser sight on defense, and you should avoid doing so. Mistake 9. Equipping bad recoil attachments. Newer players, when they come over to Siege, a lot of times they'll just throw on whatever attachment sounds good to them. You might see them with an angled grip and muzzle brake on Jaeger's gun, and this is a horrible idea. Generally, you want to run a flash hider on any weapons with a lot of vertical recoil, and then a compensator on any guns that have a lot of horizontal recoil, and then you want to put that together with a vertical grip. You want this on pretty much every weapon, because if you don't run those attachments, you're going to have a lot harder time controlling the recoil, and you might end up losing fights because the recoil gets too jumpy and you weren't expecting it. Mistake 10. Red pinging on cams. Red pinging on cams 9 times out of 10 will just get the camera shot, because it alerts the enemies that you're pinging that you know they're there. So they're going to start looking for that camera immediately after they get red pinged. And 9 times out of 10, unless it's a really well hidden Valkyrie camera, it's going to get shot. So pretty much never red ping on cameras, especially if it isn't a bulletproof one. Mistake 11, getting too aggressive while roaming. A lot of players think that roaming is all about getting kills. However, that is not the case. In Siege, when you're roaming, you just want to be wasting as much time as possible. So generally, you just want to shoot at the attackers, make them scared to push you, and then fall back once they start surrounding you. So what you don't want to do is run at the enemy team and try to get kills and then end up dying in the process. Because if your roamers die early while you're on defense, 9 times out of 10, you're going to end up losing that round because the attackers don't have to worry about anyone flanking them and they can just focus on committing to the strategy they have in mind. Mistake 12, not calling out to your team when you rotate. Whenever you stop holding an angle in Siege or you move to a different position on defense, you always want to tell your teammates that you're doing so, because your teammate might be playing in a position where they're expecting you to keep holding that angle, and then when you leave, they might end up dying to the angle you were just watching. If you tell your teammates when you're rotating and what angles you're watching, they can more accurately position themselves on the map, and it ensures that they're always watching the correct angle. Mistake 13, having too many people on site. Many players who play defense are scared to play outside of the bomb site, simply just for the fact that they're not used to Siege, and so the idea of roaming or playing anywhere else other than in the bomb site scares them. However, generally, if you have any more than 2 people sitting directly in the bomb site, 9 times out of 10, that's going to end up hurting you significantly. That's because when you don't have enough roamers off site, it's a lot easier for the attackers to get into the building and surround the bomb site. And then once the bomb site is surrounded, it's very easy for them to just pick off the anchors one by one. So you generally want to have a maximum of 2 people playing in the bomb site at once. Mistake 14, bringing nothing to make rotates. You always want to be paying attention to what your teammates are bringing. If none of your teammates have shotguns or none of your teammates have impacts to make rotates, you always want to pick an operator that can do that. This is because it's super important to have rotates between the bomb site and also to be able to make head holes. And so if your teammates aren't bringing anything to do either of those things, you need to be paying attention to that and choosing an operator accordingly. If you don't, it's going to end up with you either having to waste a nitro cell to get the rotate open, or you'll just end up with no rotate at all, which means the attackers will have a much easier time pushing the site. Mistake 15, not playing off your teammates. Players, especially in lower ranks, don't realize that they need to be playing off their teammates, and instead they'll just go play on the other side of the map away from anyone else, and they won't have anyone nearby to help them. The reason why this is such a bad idea in Siege is because you want to be able to trade when your teammates die. So this is why you typically want to play pretty close to another teammate. This is why roamers typically roam in groups of 2, so that way they can play off of each other, and that's also why anchors typically play pretty close to each other, so that way if one of them dies, they can end up getting the trade. Now, what is a trade? A trade is basically just when someone dies on your team, but then you get a kill on the attack immediately afterwards. It evens out the man count and stops the attackers from getting ahead of you in man count. And it's extremely important because if the attackers have a higher man count than you late in the round, it's going to be a lot easier for them to execute onto the site and get the plant down. Mistake 16, spectating when you die. In Siege, you always want to be on cameras as soon as you die. You never want to just be sitting AFK, spectating your teammates, or scrolling your phone. The reason for this is obvious. You want to be giving your team as much information as possible. And if you're not on cameras, you're not going to be gathering any information for your team, and you're just going to be seeing what your teammates are already seeing. This is why you should always be on cameras. Even if it's a camera that doesn't currently seem useful, you may end up seeing something that could be useful for your teammates later. So always sit on cams, even if all the seemingly important ones have been shot. Mistake 17, blaming your teammates and being toxic when you die. You see this a lot in Siege. Players will die and then immediately start yelling in game chat at their teammate and blaming them for why they died. You never want to do this, even if it is true. If your teammate gets you killed and you start yelling in game chat, all it's really going to do is make that player play worse, or it's going to make them get more toxic towards you, and then your entire team's morale is just going to fall apart. If you die because one of your teammates makes a stupid mistake, don't get mad at them in game chat. You can get mad at them privately, but just don't get mad at them in game chat and just keep it pushing, because a game can always be clawed back and you don't want to ruin that possibility by making your teammate mad at you. Mistake 18, leaving environmental objects up. Right now, a lot of players don't even really understand where all the environmental objects are because they're relatively new to Siege X. However, there are some environmental objects that can be extremely detrimental to the defense. And so if you notice some of these objects like fire extinguishers or gas pipes laying around the map, you should shoot those objects that are bad for you so that way the attackers can't use it against you later in the round. So try to do this in the prep phase before the attackers are able to get in the building and use it against you. Mistake 19, stacking too much utility on one side of the map. In Siege, you want to have your utility generally spread around the bomb site on different areas. The reason for this is because if the attackers end up doing a push that you're not expecting, you'll still have utility on that side of the map ready to help you. For example, if you stack all your Jaeger ADSs on one doorway into the site and the attackers end up pushing the complete opposite side of the map, now all those ADSs are going to be doing nothing for the rest of the round. So try to make for sure that you at least place some gadgets on all sides of the map, so that way if the attackers do go through that side, you'll be ready for it. Mistake 20, reinforcing walls between the bomb site. This is only really an issue in lower ranks, but it's still worth mentioning because it can be absolutely detrimental to your defense. Generally, if you reinforce too many walls between the bomb site to the point where you can't make rotates, your team is most likely going to end up losing. The reason for this is because when you reinforce walls between the site, if the attackers get control of one bomb site, they can plant without having to worry about you shooting them or rotating through to the other site. This makes it a lot easier for the attackers to get plants down, and it also just makes it easier for them to enter the bomb site in the first place. So never do this. Mistake 21, sprinting too often. This is specifically a problem with roamers, but a lot of time people, when they play roamers, they'll just run around the map and not really aim down sights very much. If you sprint too often, you might run into an attacker that you're not expecting to be there, and then your gun won't be up and you won't be ready to take the fight, so they'll end up getting a free kill on you. In Siege, generally, you don't want to sprint unless you absolutely know the area you're sprinting in is clear. So that way, if a gunfight does end up happening, you're ready for it and you won't get caught off guard. Mistake 22, not taking advantage of your weapons. What I mean by this is players will end up picking a shotgun and then playing in a position that doesn't allow them to take advantage of that shotgun. They'll play in a long distance position that puts them at a disadvantage. This is the opposite of what you want to do. If you're playing smoke with a shotgun SMG-11, you want to play close range. You want to find a position that you can play in either in or around the bomb site that you can take close range gunfights on the attackers easily. And the opposite goes for if you're picking an operator like a Rooney with a DMR. You want to be taking long range gunfights in that case because your weapon and the weapon sights that you have available are going to allow you to do that and be more effective at that than if you were to take a fight in close range. So try to take the gun you're using into account when you're choosing where you're going to play inside the map. Mistake 23, sticking to the same strategy repeatedly. When you lose in Siege, generally you don't want to run the same strategy back a second time. However, people do this all the time in ranked. The reason why you don't want to do this is because if you run the same strategy back, the attackers already know how to counter it and they'll be able to walk straight through your strategy easily. And even if you don't lose while using that strategy, you don't want to reuse it later if you go to overtime. The reason for this is because if you reuse the same strategy again in overtime, the enemy team will be prepared for it. They're going to know what you're going to bring, and they'll be able to more effectively counter your strategy. So generally, you don't want to use the same strategy twice in ranked, and you always want to mix things up, whether it be by picking new operators or by picking a whole new bomb site entirely. Mistake 24, refusing to switch bomb sites. This kind of goes along with the previous mistake, but a lot of time players will end up losing a round on a bomb site, and then they'll just keep picking that bomb site until they eventually win it. You don't want to do this. Even if a bomb site might generally be considered meta or the best bomb site on the map, if you end up losing it, a lot of times it's more in your favor to just switch to a different bomb site to A, catch the attackers off guard, but also to B, potentially force the attackers to push a site that they're not super familiar with or super comfortable with. For example, if you're playing Gym Bedroom on Clubhouse and you end up losing, you might just want to go to Church Arsenal instead, because Church Arsenal, while many people might not consider it as good as Gym, it's still a decent bomb site, and the attacking team that you're going up against might not be as good at attacking that site, and so you might end up getting a win by switching bomb sites that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise. Mistake 25, not strategizing your bans. In ranked, you always want to pick the operators you're banning based on what bomb site you're going to go next and also what the enemy team has been running. However, a lot of teams won't do that. They'll just ban the most meta operators and just go from there. For example, if the enemy team isn't picking Blackbeard, there's no reason to ban Blackbeard. Even if he might be an operator that you're scared of them picking in the future or that might be a little annoying, you won't want to waste a ban on him when you could ban someone more useful. For example, if you're picking the bomb site Church Arsenal on Clubhouse, a much better ban might be someone like Habana so that the enemy team can't get the hatches open, or banning an operator like Maverick so that they can't open Dirt Wall as easily. Those bans will be much more effective than a Blackbeard ban, especially if the enemy team isn't picking him. Mistake 26, not using code Beast in the store. I mean, if you're not using code Beast, what are you doing? All you have to do is go into the store, click the creator code button, and then type in Beast into the code bar. It helps support me, and I would really appreciate it if you would do so. Mistake 27, running out. This kind of goes along with the spawn peak mistake I mentioned earlier, but generally you don't want to be getting super aggressive on the attack because it's going to end up giving them a free pick 9 times out of 10. Especially with claymores in the state they currently are, it's a lot harder to pull off a run out without dying in the process. So it's generally not worth doing. The only exception to this is when an enemy is repelling in a position that really is going to end up losing your team the round, then you can make the decision to jump out a window and potentially make a trade with them before you end up dying to a claymore. But 9 times out of 10, it's not worth running out, and it's just going to end up losing your team the round. Mistake 28, wasting your explosives. If your teammates have shotguns that help you make rotates and head holes on the site, don't waste your impacts or nitro cells on it. The reason why you don't want to waste your explosives in the prep phase is because if the enemy team is bringing an operator like Oso, or they're bringing shield operators, those explosives will be much better used to counter them than by being wasted on a rotate that your teammate with a shotgun could have made anyway. Mistake 29, reinforcing disadvantageous walls. Now, what do I mean by disadvantageous wall? Well, a disadvantageous wall is any wall that makes it easier for the attackers to get into the map or to push the bomb site. For example, a wall that you should pretty much never reinforce unless you're going for a very specific strategy is the master bedroom wall going into the top main stairs hallway on Oregon. If you reinforce this wall, the attackers will be able to enter the master closet a lot easier and have a lot less angles to worry about. Whereas if you were to put head holes there instead, the enemy team would have to be much more worried about a defender swinging them from those head holes, and so they won't be able to just run into the closet as easily. So when you're reinforcing walls on maps, you need to be thinking through whether or not it's going to be advantageous for the enemy team. And if it is, then you don't want to reinforce it. And the final and 30th mistake is reloading too often. In Siege, you don't want to just immediately reload after every gunfight. If you do this and another enemy swings you, it just makes you a free kill no matter what, because you're not going to be able to shoot back. A lot of players build this habit from playing games like Call of Duty, and then they come over to Siege and think that it's a good idea to do that. However, it's not, because reload speeds are a lot slower in Siege, and also because the enemy will be able to hear you reloading and push off of that reload sound. So only reload unless your gun is extremely low on ammo, or unless you're behind cover and completely safe. Anyways, that wraps up today's video. If you enjoyed today's video, I make Siege content just like this twice a week, so go subscribe to the channel and follow me on Twitter if you don't want to miss the next upload. Now, if you want to watch another video just like this one of a DB popping up on your screen right now that I'm sure y'all enjoy, I'll see you next time, friends, and peace.